My face currently feels like I've been run through by Tom Stewart.
Puts it to the top of the square. Oh, beautiful little fist in there by Dale. Crucial centimetre moments.
He definitely has a bit of the Belcho spirit. As I have a bit of the Belcho spirit.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the podcast that spent the off-season pretending that other sports hit the same, like a cocaine addict powering through energy drinks through the night.
It's true.
It's been a big off-season and a big month for footy news. Joel Selwood was apparently cheating the salary cap, and Jamar Ugle-Hagan pulled a gun on Lob according to some leaked WhatsApp messages. Most importantly, it means that Frank Costa was apparently still alive in 2022 to be giving Joel Selwood money. Melbourne are finished, but maybe they're also good, and North are on the rise, but maybe they're also the worst team I've ever seen. State and local teams are learning that if they want to have women's teams, they actually have to ask them about whether they want to have sex offenders playing for the same club as them. Should the AFL go to Vegas? And if they do, I think that I have the person who they should send with them. It's the number 2 Northern Bullets fan in Australia, and cultural heritage ambassador of the Back Pocket podcast. It's Alistair.
I don't want to go to Vegas.
You don't want to go to Vegas?
No. I feel like that would go poorly for me. Gambling's in my blood.
Welcome back.
It feels like it was just yesterday we recorded the last episode of this podcast that I definitely remember very well.
Oh, for sure, yeah. I totally remember that. The one before we get into anything else, I just saw on the news that someone who was flying to Jake Lloyd's 250th game, his dad's best friend, disarmed an attempted attacker on an aeroplane who had a knife, apparently, and he didn't want to make a fuss because he was just trying to get to Jake Lloyd's 250th. Which led me to uncover a previous story from Jake Lloyd where he was maybe trained by a hitman as a teenager. There's an article from Fox Footy from years ago about someone called Jimmy, no last name.
Jimmy, not good when you're just called Jimmy.
And it says, Jimmy is a family friend to the Lloyds. He's a fitness guru, a specialist if you like, whose profession is not allowed to be known, nor is his surname. Then there's a photo, I'm going to show you this photo, of Jimmy in a gas mask carrying a boxing bag.
What the fuck,
and
man?
The next page reads, every clock in the Lloyd household, except for in the master bedroom, is set half an hour forward in time. It's so the boys are always ready on time, Tony, his dad, says. So I don't know what's going on with the Lloyd family, but that's my nice little intro for tomorrow night's game.
Do you reckon Jimmy taught him how to climb goalposts?
And he passed that information on, maybe. I hope Jimmy taught him how to run at a fullback. It's,
what
anyway,
a strange story.
That's one thing I learnt today.
That's the preview of that's the entire preview of Sydney Hawthorn. All you need to know is that there's a bloke called Jimmy.
Well, look, if that guy's going to be there, Hawkball can't stop a literal. He went full Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah, he'll take out several knees.
If he was on that plane.
Shut up.
Anyway, football's back apparently, except that we're only getting 2 games.
Yeah, well, I guess let's talk about that. Back Pocket was due to preview 4 full games and get excited for the season, talk about predictions, and everything went to shit because of a cyclone. Yeah.
Hurricane Tortilla. I also think that the decision to put it during the finals bye week is odd.
Well, essentially, to sum it all up, the cyclone is going to be so bad they have to delay the games. One will be played in round 3, which makes sense because both teams that are due to play have a bye then.
Yep.
And the other one is being floated as being played in the final round of the season, where both of those teams already have games.
Yes.
And they will have to play basically 3 games in a round.
Yeah.
It only makes sense if they make their game the last of the season, because otherwise it affects the other 2 teams.
Yeah, because the AFL was like, maybe we'll swap them around depending on where the teams are. It's like, that's a bad idea.
No.
I almost feel like the best plan of action would have been to just split the points at this point. Like there's almost no good outcome that can come from it. Unless we get a standalone game where Ben King needs 10 goals to kick the Coleman and neither team can make finals, and we're just waiting to see if Ben King can kick 10 goals. Outside of that, I don't see any way where it makes sense. The ultimate is if they Essendon can make finals. They play during the bye week. They win. And then lose their first final by like 100 points, and Rowan Connolly has to try and still justify why he thinks the finals bye is a disadvantage.
But wouldn't the argument be if you play the week before the finals bye, the week of the finals bye, that you'd be better off the week after?
That's what I'm saying.
Isn't that what people are saying?
Yeah, so it'd be funny if that doesn't happen. Like
I
they play the week before and then they get pumped the week after because they cop a fully rested Bulldogs team.
Yeah, well, the Bulldogs making finals, you reckon?
If they get through their first 5 weeks...
it's more than 5 weeks.
They've got... Well, yeah, but I'm... like
Waitman's missing 12.
Yeah, so Waitman and Jones are the only long-term.
Bond's missing 6.
Bond's missing 6 weeks, so 4 games.
Okay.
Waitman and Jones are long-term, but they covered for Waitman for most of last year. If they can cover for Jones... If they ever play Bustlinger...
Nah, it doesn't look like it's happening.
I think they'll be okay, but their first 5 weeks is pretty horrid. They've got North first, but then they've got like Collingwood, Carlton, Brisbane, Sydney or something. It's
a rough couple of rounds, but it does lead me to talk into the injury carnage that's happened over this pre-season.
It's been insane.
I feel like every day is a new story about someone else who is either out for the season or out for 6+ weeks.
Yeah.
And some clubs are horrifically affected by it. GWS, Bulldogs and Carlton probably have about 10 players missing on their list at the moment. Yep. All 3 are supposed to be finals chances, so it's a huge way to start the season for all 3 of those. And then you've just got the annoying ones, like Zach Butters missing 6 weeks. Goulden missing at least several months.
Yeah.
Fractured is
brutal.
Yeah, bad.
I don't know if they're going to do anything about... Like, we talked about it a bit last year, that these injuries are going to get more common now that they've brought in the dangerous tackle rules, because how he got tackled is also how like Norton did his knee last year. People are going to try and tackle like that to prevent the head hitting the ground, and all it's going to do is damage knees and ankles.
Well, you can't win. It's a contact sport, so what are you supposed to do?
2038 non-contact football.
You can't ban people for injuring someone.
No, not if it's not intentional.
Yeah.
The other game this weekend, what is that? It's GWS Collingwood. GWS have a lot of injuries. Yeah.
I looked at their bench, and I think there's like 3 games between them. It's a bit rough. They're running thin at the moment, because you have to take into account the fact that several of their players are suspended for dressing up as the Twin Towers.
Yeah, that's right.
So not only do they have an injury crisis, they're also missing players like Riccardi, who would slot in this week considering Hogan's injured, but he can't play.
He slammed his finger in the car door.
Yeah.
He... I would love to have been on the bus. Like, he's coming out of the toilet at the back of the bus, they're driving back from Canberra, and like you just hear like a crunch and a cry out of pain from the back door.
What do you reckon Kingsley says in that scenario?
What?
You'd be pissed, right?
Yeah.
It's an avoidable injury. Don't slam your finger in the bus toilet door.
Maybe it was the bus driver. Maybe he slammed the door when...
He's a Sydney fan.
Brakes when Jesse Hogan was trying to come out the door and he's tripped. I don't know. It's funny. Because at first, like, it's maybe on me, but I was like, I'm sure he slammed his finger in the door. But then learning it was on the bus is very funny.
Because you've got witnesses, I guess.
People saw it happen. He's not lying. It's just a really funny injury.
There was an interview with him about it either today or yesterday, but I didn't watch it, so I probably should have done that, brushed up for the pod. But... It's definitely one of the stranger reasons to miss 2 games of footy.
Yeah, as the reigning Coleman medalist, when your team really needs numbers at the moment. GWS is such a weird team in the way that, like, I feel like every year they either lose players to other clubs or they have retirements or injuries, and then some guy just comes out of nowhere who's just AFL standard.
Yeah.
Like we've had, like Darcy Jones did it last year, Brent Daniels a couple of years ago. Yeah. Like someone just slots into that team.
Looks like it'll be leak this year.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they can, cover those holes the way they have previously.
The interesting thing is it's not a star this time.
No.
It's 3 role players.
Yeah.
And that's obviously huge for your club. So.
All right, well, the main reason we wanted to do this episode, or why people asked us to do this episode, I guess, was to do predictions. I wrote mine down just in case we had to do them next week if we couldn't get the microphones working, but...
I've written mine down. What order do you want to do them in? Because I want to eliminate the teams that I think are contenders but won't win at first.
Right, okay.
Yeah. So,
Sweet.
it's funny because of what you mentioned earlier in the intro. Geelong is obviously a big favourite at the moment, but I have a feeling with the... interesting stories rolling around and the fact that their training loads are now fucked because of this cyclone rearrangement stuff. I think it might be a bit difficult.
Both Scott brothers loving the fact they've got something to complain about.
Oh, yeah.
Both of them just sitting there like, oh, the dream.
I think Brisbane are out for the same reason. Their trading load's fucked, and it's also hard to go back-to-back. I think in the AFL era, it's only 3 teams that have gone back-to-back.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, could be 4. It's 3 or 4. Sydney obviously got pumped in a grand final. Odds are saying that they're going to miss, right? That's the stats on that recently.
I'm liking where you're going with this, okay.
GWS, Bulldogs, Carlton, as I mentioned, injury lists stacked. They're coming from a far way back.
So no one can win it.
Hawthorn too inexperienced.
Yeah.
I'm
flag medal.
I think Melbourne might Bradbury their way into a grand final win.
I would love it because last year I kept saying like if they get players back, at week 11 last year they were close to the best team in the comp.
When you
those games against Geelong and Carlton back to back, they had those two really good games, and it was like
it's
that's
accuracy
like they're all
for
top
them.
4
Accuracy's
sides.
Been their problem.
And then Melbourne had just injuries deluxe.
Gawn, Lever, Oliver,
May,
Petrarca.
We got Glomp, baby.
Glomp. 3 of those players seem to be back into career best form.
Yeah.
Gawn said he's never run as fast as he has this pre-season. Oliver and Petrarca just cut it up in a practice game. Practice game is a practice game, but whatever.
I'm surprised Petrarca's alive, let alone looking like that.
May and Lever are just going to continue on doing what they're doing. If they have all 5 of those running hot...
Plus the kids with a year of experience from covering for them last year.
2 very good draftees look like they're going to slot into that side straight away.
And like... Yeah, the way
Would they lose? Alex Neil-Bullen?
The way Windsor stepped up last year, my boy Tholstrup looked really good. Like those kids are a year in, filling in for your Salems and your Olivers and your Petrarcas who missed games last year. Now they can kind of take that backseat role they probably should have been taking last season.
Rivers is back to put in midfield in case of emergency, so they can put him in multiple spots. I'm picking them.
I'm excited by Melbourne.
I'm picking them, and earlier in the year I had them sitting at like 15th. So
my prediction's still Brisbane. I think kind of for the reasons we said last year when we thought they weren't going to do it. Just they got a lot coming in, which helps with the hunger, I think. Like they've got a lot of players coming in who didn't win it last year. They got another Ashcroft who, from that practice match, looks also insane.
True.
And my one's Freo. I think that if they can stop being Freo...
That's the problem, can they?
Yeah, can they stop being Freo? Maybe not, but if they can...
I think they've got
I think they're really good.
I've got to say they've got a Justin Longmuir problem.
Maybe, yeah. Well, I will say, in the All-Stars match, it was very concerning watching exactly what happened to them last year. And, like, I know Longmuir said it was a vanilla version of their game plan, but, like, does that mean that last year was the vanilla version of the game? Because it looked like that.
It's concerning, but... I have to see a couple of weeks of Freo first because, I mean, there are definitely some demons there.
They've got Geelong and Geelong round 1. If they win that, I don't even know if that proves anything to me because they keep doing those ones.
Yeah, it's interesting, but I feel like it's Longmuir, but we'll see.
Bolton might just be what they need. There was definitely...
Do they need points kicked?
I don't know if it was a pre-season game. I don't know if it was because it was a pre-season game, but they were definitely much more of have a ping mentality in that game on the weekend against Melbourne than they were last year. Like blokes were just having shots rather than doing their weird like reverse around the 50 to try and get someone in a perfect position. I just think that they are better off having a weaker forward line and Jackson in the ruck than having Reedy in the ruck and Jackson at full forward.
I don't know about that ruck scenario.
It doesn't work for me. Brownlow
medal. Well, the obvious choice is Nick Dacos, right? So I'm not picking him, and I'm going to go for Caleb Sarong.
Yeah, so
a little bit of joy for Fremantle supporters, considering I don't have them. I don't have the 8.
Yeah, I agree. Dacos is so obvious. He looked so ball hungry again in that practice match, and then went off. Like he had like 38 midway through the third, and then he was like, "Well, I'm done."
I wonder if it's because for us, obviously, it feels like at the moment we're like, "Oh, please, anyone but Dacos." I wonder if it's going to swap to that Bont mentality where,
like, eventually we'll
go, "Oh, seriously, Dacos hasn't won one yet."
It would get to that point. Mine's Horn Francis. I reckon this is the year he...
Oh, the horny one.
He'll have that spot for the first 6 weeks ahead of Butters. Yeah. So he'll be number 2 instead of number 3.
If he plays every game to the quality that he has in the preseason and the All-Stars match.
That first half in the All-Stars game, before they put him at full forward instead so he could kick 3 goals in the second half, he was insane. Like, he was just everywhere. And the scary thing is that he seems to have learnt to kick, which is really worrying.
Just depends on his temperament, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Coleman, I've just written Jeremy Cameron.
Yeah, so
boring, bland.
It was one of those ones where I went, well, Hawkins is gone now.
Hawkins is gone, so he's going to get the majority of the...
hopefully Danger takes one of the forwards away from him. Yeah.
Mark to goal scenarios. Obviously, Ollie Henry and Tyson Stengel both do a lot of goals from marks, but it seems the obvious choice. Hogan's injured. Mm-hmm. Who knows about Curnow?
Larky's at North. Yeah. I thought the same. I kind of went through the same thing in my brain. I was like, the King brothers are always injury prone.
Yeah.
Cameron's just consistent. He got close again last year, despite playing really high half forward most of the year. It'll be role dependent, I think, for him. Neither of us picked Marby or Chol. I just want to...
big maps.
I know it wasn't... Like, we don't know it was Sicily, but it had to have been Sicily, right? Like, I can't imagine any of the other captains were like, oh, yeah, Big Maps is the Coleman guy this year.
I don't know, I'm not.
Surely pick the Wizard if you're going to pick anyone. I reckon he'll probably outscore him this year. If he could kick straight last year, he would have outscored him.
That'll be interesting.
Rising star pick.
I've gone for Kako.
Yeah? Finn O'Sullivan.
I think the uproar about Isaac Kako after one practice game
it was insane,
is almost more than I've seen for a player.
I couldn't believe the hype for a practice match.
If he can kick 2 goals a game consistently this year, he will win the Rising Star for me. Finn O'Sullivan, I'm not sold on because he plays for North.
Yeah. And you have to be Sheasel to win it in a team that bad. But I think Finn O'Sullivan looks really fucking good. Like, he looks really good. Alright, so in our middle, who do you reckon's going to win?
I've gone Colin Solo.
Colin Solo?
Sam Colin Solo. Plus his first All-Australian blazer.
Oh, he needs it.
Yeah.
I've gone Harris Andrews.
Okay,
he's
that's
gone close 3 years in a row now.
He's been a consistent top end.
He's probably, like, when you look at all aspects of a key defender in modern football, close to, like, the best pound for pound going around. I actually hyphenated. I don't know why Harris Andrews is just apparently a hyphenated surname on my phone here.
It's one of those players who you say both.
Yeah,
you don't say Andrews. You say Harris Andrews. Weird. You wrote down.
I wrote trade, biggest trade.
And this is gonna. If we have any Fremantle supporting fans listening, lol.
Luke Jackson back to Melbourne.
That's one.
Oh, okay.
But I haven't written traded. I've written request. I've written Luke Jackson requests a trade to Melbourne.
Yep.
And Sean Darcy requests a trade to Geelong.
Oh, could you imagine both of them? They lose both?
In like one day after the other. Luke Jackson announces the trade, like the request, and then the next day Sean Darcy comes out and says he wants to get to Geelong.
That'd be insane.
Could you imagine
Liam Reedy's solo ruck next year?
They'd have to pick up someone. What's that Brian doing it?
Oh, yeah.
Isn't it? Apparently they're going to sign Draper to 6 years, so...
Brian looked really good in the practice match. Mine is Butters to Bulldogs.
I don't know.
Sees Horn Francis tear it up, he goes, oh.
I actually thought the opposite. Like, earlier in the year, I said... Not too much earlier, because it was only announced recently, but I said Kenny will go assistant at Geelong and take Butters with him.
Okay, yeah.
Because they love Kenny, apparently.
They do love Ken. I mean, he loves them, too, if we look at... my joke is always, when something goes bad for Geelong, the same weekend something goes worse for Port, which is Ken's been a double agent the whole time. Geelong lose to Melbourne in Perth by, 80 points. Port lose a home prelim to the Bulldogs by 70 points. He was a Bulldogs fan growing up.
Interesting.
He's the right age that they would want to get a midfielder in at.
I definitely think they need to, because their top three is...
It would make sense for Port to go, well, we don't need 3 forward-running midfielders in the same midfield. Like, Willem Drew does so much work being the main defensive midfielder.
They'd have to pay up hard for Butters.
Yeah. Who have they got? They could send Jamal Ugle-Hagan for Butters.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, juicy.
It would really take...
the talk of the town
generational
is
talent, Marshalls.
The talk of the town is Ugle-Hagan to Sydney. That's the...
I guess that's the
chat.
That's the Franklin of it. Get away from the media, I guess. I don't know.
And then you can be in the rooms after a grand final and all your boys can be like, why is he getting paid triple what I am? And then I was like, what's your predicted big headline?
I feel like I've picked on a team here.
Is it Freo again?
I said Freo missed finals, but Longmuir extended for another year.
Even on his weird little rolling contract.
Yeah.
I wrote generic, didn't say which one. I just said Scott blames Cyclone Alfred for form slump. Can be either Scott, doesn't matter.
It could be either.
Yeah.
I do want to just back, and I said Caleb Strong for the Brownlow, so I've given them something.
Yeah.
That's a
Look,
little-
and we that was our hope last year watching the Brownlow night.
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe he didn't poll better than I thought he would.
Did you do an 8?
Top 8.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's still my old one.
Oh, okay.
And
I changed mine.
I feel like I should probably drop the Bulldogs down a little bit. But my top 8 was Brisbane, Sydney, Geelong Bulldogs, Freo, Carlton, GWS, Adelaide.
Okay. I'm going to go other way around. I'm going bottom up. I got Sydney at 8, Hawthorn, Adelaide, GWS. And
Yep.
top 4 being Carlton, Melbourne, Brisbane, Geelong on top.
Yeah. I think I'm swapping Carlton with Bulldogs now, based on what I've seen and what's happened injury-wise. But I still think the top 8 is probably what it'll be.
Look, I've left Collingwood and Fremantle out, and if they pop in instead of an Adelaide, Hawthorn or Sydney, I wouldn't be shocked.
It's really interesting seeing all of the data models have a bigger gap between 16th and 15th than from 1st to 15th.
Yeah. It's a very weirdly even competition outside of those 3 terrible teams.
Yeah. I mean, I sent you guys the shout out to Cody, who does all the ABC stuff again. But
Shout out to Cody.
The fact that Richmond lost more than a quarter of their quote unquote player value in one off season. I do think we're looking at 2012 GWS bad for Richmond this year.
I definitely think it's going to be. I think they'll put in an effort for the first couple of weeks, and then it's going to drop off something fierce.
Yeah.
It all depends also on the durability of Tom Lynch, and I can't believe I'm going to say this, Camden McIntosh taking the brunt in the midfield. If those
what a fascinating leadership group with Tom Lynch and Nathan Broad in the five-man leadership group. Look, if Hopper and Taranto don't stay fit all year, they are going to be in for so much pain. It's going to be and it's one of those years where the longer it goes on, the harder it will be for players to keep trying. When you just get demoralised, we saw it with West Coast a few years ago. When it just keeps happening to you, it's very hard to keep your head above water. And I get why they've done it. If Tasmania are coming in, those picks are going to be gone, and they wanted to get into this year, which was a good draft. They've also got North's first pick next year in the most insane trade of all time.
I think they're set to grab a lot of good players, but it takes years.
Look at Gold Coast, right?
Yes.
They had all that talent. It ended up going to other clubs or not coming good.
It takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
I mean, look at North and how many midfielders they've picked up over the past 6 years.
Absolutely. And their off-season moves are weird. Did they need Darling? I get Parker.
I get Darling. I think Darling showed that he has the fitness to play for at least 2 seasons.
We're definitely historically Darling career defenders, not necessarily Darling player defenders, but he's a better player than a lot of people give him credit for.
Yes,
he's remembered
absolutely.
for a couple of horrible moments on big stages, but he's had a hell of a career.
He's in the top 60 goal kickers of all time.
His best football was insane.
And he could potentially boost that further with 2 years at North.
Yep.
He could maybe crack the 50, which would be insane.
And if it takes pressure off Lucky...
That's exactly it. They have picked someone to bolster all 3 lines. Caleb Daniel at halfback, Luke Parker mid/forward, I guess, and Darling to be a marking forward up
I guess it also means that Griffin, Logan, Toby Pink aren't playing weird forward roles.
Is Toby Pink still on the list?
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know.
Yeah. They couldn't delist him, could they? With the list they had?
I'm Googling it. You keep talking.
The other one was, I guess it's a bit... we could have mentioned at the start, but we're planning on doing things a bit differently this year.
Yes.
With the structure of the podcast.
Just because there's no games yet, so we can't really roll into the new structure.
But the plan is to have the votes a bit later, so we're not just rolling into stats and numbers straight away, because that does tend to be a bit zone out-ish. So I guess stay tuned for that. Previewing the 2 games, we don't really have to do difficult tips this week. There's 2 games. And I'm assuming you're tipping... That's a great moustache.
He's still on the list.
Fimba.
He's 32. He's listed as a key forward. Yeah, 2 games this week. Who do you think will win?
I think...
Sydney or Hawthorn?
Sydney will win.
Oh, same.
And I think Collingwood will win.
Same.
It's crazy. I think Collingwood GWS is the one I'm more on the fence about.
It's giant stadium, so it could go either way. But with
And
the injury, Hogan.
You would expect both games will be wet, considering there is a cyclone only 100 k's north of Sydney.
Yeah.
But
what a fantastic way to open the season.
Oh yeah, it's almost like we haven't started football at the start of March historically for a reason. And like, I've seen a lot of people being like, "Well, we didn't know there was going to be a cyclone." It's like, yeah, but we also know what the weather's like in the northern states at this time of year. Like,
it really is
cyclone or no.
With the amount of injuries happening in the preseason and the cyclone obviously out of control, it feels like the footy gods are saying, put it back to normal.
Yeah. Hey man, remember when you used to start 3 weeks later?
Yeah.
Maybe just jump back to that. Because that really
maybe don't have teams that played in a premiership
like it was only
rolling up to play before teams that finished 18th are about to play.
Yes.
Sure, I'm guessing the Richmond game is going to be less fun to watch, but who cares?
Yeah. It's... I had something. Hang on. I'll get there.
You'll get there.
Yeah, it was only a couple of years ago, obviously, that we didn't have gather round or opening round. So we're 2 weeks later.
Gather round has added a round.
And then you go back to 2014, we didn't have the pre-finals bye. So we are starting 3 weeks
earlier
than we were previously. And of course that's going to have an effect, especially on your Geelong, Brisbane, Sydney, Carlton, GWS. Like the teams that played finals last year. That's horrible. Like you don't get a break at all. These players are coming back so early last year that it was like... Either A, you're not going to come back fit enough, or B, you're going to come back too early, not have had enough rest, and not let your body have a chance.
Is the solution pushing back the season?
The solution is playing a 17-round season.
Well, I would like that. The media and TV rights would not.
Yeah, God no.
But I think there is something good about rematches. I like the idea of... What was it, Gold Coast and Essendon playing each other back-to-back in weeks that they aren't going to do.
That would have been funny.
But if we start the season in April instead, and the grand final is no longer on the last day or first day of October or whatever the fuck they've been doing.
September, yeah.
Yeah, but didn't they do
Unless
one...
the Olympics are on.
Didn't they do one where it was first weekend of October?
Unless the Olympics are on.
Just push it back.
Yeah, it's fine. Just start the season later.
Yeah.
Play the women's season during that period.
There's no good solution to that currently because they're not even including the Sydney teams in the VFL.
Yeah.
It's a joke.
It's a mess. The whole thing's a mess. But we have a cultural heritage. It's not even around.
Cultural heritage matches.
Series.
Culture to be determined.
Culture later.
CTBD.
5 teams, no culture. Geelong, Gold Coast, Collingwood, St Kilda, Essendon. No culture allowed. GWS, lots of culture. They're in 5 of the 9 games.
Sydney is in one of the games and they have 2 non-white players on their list.
Yeah.
Anyway, I won't get into that.
Yes. I mean, we didn't talk about it last year because we didn't do any final stuff, but the fact that we just had an AFL season for the first time since I've been picking All-Australians with no Indigenous players in the team is grim. Especially when Tyson Stengel was the best small forward in the comp last year and wasn't selected in the Australian team. It's concerning, to say the least.
Yeah, well, I mean, that is something that's being focused on. I think they were announcing stuff for WA, like putting in more funding towards hopefully improving Indigenous talent. But it is... You look at some lists and you go, all right, you've got like 6-7 players, that's normal. Then you look at another list that has 0 and you go, what's happened here? And it's not... You can't. It's not a situation where the clubs are being racist and not picking them.
No, I think there's an issue with, and we've talked, like it's part of the people talk about the private school problem with pathways.
Yes.
I think that's a huge issue as well. Like I made a joke the other day about how when we were at Govo, like it has nothing to do with this, but like when we were there, the school was like dilapidated. The gym was creaky, and we played on an oval that didn't really have drainage.
Was it even oval shaped?
No. And we had like 10 players get drafted in like a 5-year period, and there's been none since in the fancy new gym and the new oval. But the real answer is that it's not a private school. It doesn't have the pathways, and therefore they're not watching them from the age of 12, and people aren't being brought into the school because they're good at football necessarily.
Shocked the program's still going, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. But like that's one of the bigger problems. And like people talk about they're only drafting private school kids, and that's kind of true, but it's also that the private schools are just giving scholarships to every kid who's good at sport.
Yeah.
So like they're not all coming from these backgrounds. It's just that they're not
They're being snapped
diversified.
up by those schools.
And then when you have the, Indigenous kids or kids from immigrant parents who may not have that same pathway into those programs, they're going to be overlooked in more situations than others. And that's to no fault of their own.
Or they'll end up in an academy program and only on one of 4 lists.
Yeah, and those clubs may not have enough space to pick them up. Look at Lawson Humphreys, for example. There was no reason, like, it was understandable why West Coast didn't pick him up at the time, but the fact that he was only in their sights for that long until he played a couple of seasons of Waffle is exactly where this problem comes from. So, there's no easy solution, but these people are paid millions of dollars a year to come up with a solution and consistently don't, being the bigger problem. But the real solution, as Zach Merritt said, is we need smaller lists. We need less people on the list.
Yeah. And you need to pay the good players more.
Yeah, pay the good players more. Zach Merritt has no vested interest in that. We need smaller lists. Collingwood, Carlton, West Coast and Richmond would all attest to this. The lists are too big. They definitely didn't almost run out of players in multiple occasions in the last couple of years.
Yeah, West
Carlton
Coast...
had 1.3 players of depth. And West Coast had 1.
That was last year. Yeah. West Coast were playing waffle players, remember? Because of COVID.
Yeah, but I mean, even outside of COVID, West Coast had a period where they had like 1 depth player, but lists are too big. That's the problem.
It just smacks of privilege of, it hasn't happened to us, so it doesn't happen.
Yeah,
anyway.
But winning a final hasn't happened to them either, so it's, West Coast have won a final since. Anyway, that's probably a good place to leave it for the week. That's a nice...
Just with a quick drive-by on Essendon not winning a final. Is that how you're going to end the podcast every week?
I could do. We've got too many Essendon fan listeners for that. That'd be funny, actually.
But yes, a bit of a non-serious podcast because nothing's happened.
Yeah, just getting some predictions out.
Yeah.
So that they're kind of stamped and on the internet until we delete the podcast when we're wrong about everything.
Oh, yeah. Melbourne, it's premiers? What was I thinking?
Who would have said that? We're college.
Idiot.
I think you did say that last year. Anyway, thanks for listening. You can find us at the Back Pocket AU on pretty much everything, including Substack now, where I'll be writing stuff through the year. I spent all pre-season watching people write stuff, and I was like, there's nothing to write about at the moment. There's no... I wrote my predictions, and that's about all the football
You wrote about weird alternate universe jumpers.
That was fun, yeah.
Which is a fun... I read that one.
Bring back Southport, but don't, because...
They still exist.
Yeah, but just replace Gold Coast with Southport.
We'd get a Sharks in the AFL, right?
Yeah, we could get a Sharks in the AFL.
Yeah.
Freo won't allow the Sharks. They were told no.
Good.
Anyway, this has been The Back Pocket. We will see you next week.
Bye.